stunner at this hour is that we can call Al Gore the winner.
Governor Bush is the winner. In the evening, it's going to be a long day ahead.
I think that the Bushes are intentionally trying to rig this election.
It's a lot of whining and complaining about the outcome of an election that didn't go their way.
The Chads that are being dimpled during the counting process that are then objected to and are now being counted are tainted ballots.
There are dimpled ballots, there are ballots with creases, there are ballots with lipstick on them.
Election 2000 created a lot of resentment in the country.
In presidential politics, it doesn't get crazier than this. A too close to call election, a tie in the key battleground state of Florida, where the governor is the little brother of the Republican candidate.
We thought it would be close. Never in my wildest dreams did I ever imagine it would be this close.
If you own the system, which the governor at the time, Bush, owned, you generally will win.
It's going to be a much happier Thanksgiving for the Bush family. George Walker Bush, the 43rd President of the United States.
It's time for me to go.
I am about to enter the duties of the office on which I am about to enter. So faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
That I will faithfully execute the office of President of the
According to some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions.
2.3 trillion with a T.
Of course we're after Saddam Hussein, bin Laden.
I do not think that it should be a problem for everyone to lower our personal liberties to fight terrorism. My feeling is that if you don't have anything to hide, then there is no real reason for you to be against the government monitoring emails, cell phone conversations.
Congress passes a sweeping new anti-terrorism bill as the international hunt continues for the terrorists behind the September 11th attacks and for the source of the latest wave of bioterrorism. Congress, the White House, and the Pentagon have all been mighty busy this week. But what more do we know after a week of shifting messages concerning health, politics, and war? Today, the president signed a big new anti-terrorism bill that would expand the government's ability to track down terrorists, but at some cost. Well, what's in this new anti-terrorism bill that would presumably help investigators get to the bottom of all this?
Right. There's a lot in this bill. Attorney General John Ashcroft absolutely loves it. He said, the hour this thing is signed, I'm going to instruct law enforcement how to use these new powers. Some of them are being able to trace email messages from place to place, making it easier to surveil people for terrorist purposes, for intelligence purposes. One of the interesting things I think we're going to see that will immediately affect this investigation is the sharing of information between the intelligence gatherers, the CIA, the NSA, and other places, and the FBI. What they've done is they've lowered the wall between the two, which means, for example, as one high-level Justice Department person said yesterday, we have files. The intelligence people have files that they are ready to hand over to the criminal people. What that means is they can take that, and suddenly they have a lot of new leads.
Well, it is, Gretchen. This report comes from a group called the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board, known here in Washington as the PCLOB. And they conclude that the collection of phone records is illegal and not effective. A short time ago, the White House spokesman saying the administration could not disagree more with the report. But during a series of questions, Jay Carney could not point to a specific plot where the phone records provided the primary lead.
A little weary of it. It is really, really massive. How massive? The NSA captures 500,000 buddy lists a day, 600,000 address books a day, 200 million texts a day before we even get to the telephone calls.
I had an amendment
at the desk dealing with an issue of deep concern to tens of millions of Americans, and I think a majority of the members of this body. And that is to make an important change to the USA Patriot Act so that the FBI is not given carte blanche.
If not, the yeas are 89, the nays are 10. The conference report is agreed to.
Reconsider.
Without objection.
Yesterday, December the 13th, at around 8:30 p.m. Baghdad time, United States military forces captured Saddam Hussein alive.
Hidden from view under a dirty rug and a cunningly carved trapdoor.
Now what you have is a styrofoam block that looks like a rock. And that's the hole.
So after years of being the master of millions of Iraqis, after 8 months on the run from the forces which overthrew him, this is where Saddam Hussein was found.
Captivity, under interrogation, his people have been turning their attention to what form of justice he should face.
الأسد ما يهمه إذا فرد فوق شجرة يتبسم عليه. فاهدأ. خلى فوق ما يدير بال هذه الفقاعات.
I'm a strict constitutionalist. Are you suggesting the Republicans should write me off?
While I was working on those streets, watching those folks see their jobs shipped overseas, you were a corporate lawyer sitting on the board of Walmart.
We're about to tell you something that you may have recognized was inevitable. It's now 11 o'clock. We project California for Barack Obama. That will change our electoral board from 220 votes to 275 and make Barack Obama, in our view, President-elect of the United States of America.
Hello, Chicago.
The closing numbers on the markets today, at one point the market fell as if down a well over 700 points.
Apple shares are just getting hammered this morning.
We're down by between 3 and 4.5% generally across these markets. Let's talk about the speed with which we are watching this market deteriorate. We're red everywhere, essentially, down by 4-5%.
We're down over 16%. Dow at the same time has fallen about 18%.
The stock market is now down 21%.
Because we're now down 43%.
What in the world is happening on Wall Street?
Almost everything there completely wiped out. And the NASDAQ, everything and more has been completely wiped out.
The Dow traders are standing there watching in amazement, and I don't blame them.
Their estimation was that by 2 o'clock that afternoon, $5.5 trillion would have been drawn out of the money market system of the United States, would have collapsed the entire economy of the United States, and within 24 hours, the world economy would have collapsed.
Was the worst day on Wall Street since the crash of 1987.
Look at the phone say a lot of their customers are freaked out, waiting to see how low the Dow will go.
What started in America last year has now spread to every part of the world.
We're down 9% today. The Xetra over in Frankfurt is down by 9%. The Paris market down by 9%. Austria, which was briefly suspended earlier on in the day, is down by nearly 11%.
Cicero was right. We're in the last days of this country surviving.
Steve Leisman, Treasury runs the printing presses to print the dollars. Some of the dollars go into the Fed. Fed takes the dollars, buys Treasury bonds that the Treasury issues to raise money. Money goes back into the Fed. Isn't this all kind of one big Ponzi scheme?
Sophisticated term for that, Dennis. We call it monetizing the debt.
Will the Federal Reserve monetize this debt? The Federal Reserve will not monetize the debt.
This is your basic mortgage bond. All right? The originals were simple. They were just thousands of AAA mortgages bundled together, guaranteed by the U.S. government. The modern ones are different. They're private, and they're made up of layers of tranches. The highest level AAAs getting paid first, the lowest rated Bs getting paid last, taking on defaults first. Now, obviously, if you're buying Bs, you can make more money, but they're a little risky. Sometimes they fail. Chris? Somewhere along the line, these B's and double B's went from a little risky to dog shit. Where's the trash? I'm talking rock bottom FICO scores. No income verification. Adjustable rates, dog shit. The default rates are already up from 1% to 4%, fellas. And if they rise to 8%, and they will, a lot of these triple Bs are going to 0 too.
You're saying that at 8% the bonds fail, and we are already at 4%?
That's right.
If they go to 8, it's Armageddon.
Yeah, that's right.
How come nobody's talking about this?
Miami-Dade County. Oscar Munoz used to sell real estate. Now his company clears out foreclosed homes.
Business is just going through the roof for us. Fortunately for us, unfortunately for the poor families who are going through this.
I wonder, do you ever come to houses where the people are still here?
Absolutely. That's really a sad situation. I'd rather not meet the people.
Why not?
It's not easy to come in and move a family out. It's just our job to do it for the bank. It's just the nature of what's going on in the market right now.
What is going on in the market right now? How much work are you getting?
Every day we have 20, 30 assignments.
A day?
A day.
Just your company?
Just our company. And we're one of the few companies right now who are hiring. We have to hire people because the demand is so high.
People who've been evicted tend to leave stuff behind. The next house is usually much smaller. Banks hire Munoz to move the possessions out where, by law, they remain for 24 hours. Often the neighbors pick through the remains.
The president's approval rating in the new CBS News New York Times poll is 50%, the lowest since he took office. And with most polls showing Americans believe he does not deserve the Nobel Peace Prize, it's not clear whether accepting it will help him or hurt him at home.
Good evening. Tonight, I can report to the American people and to the world that the United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden, the leader of Al-Qaeda, and a terrorist who's responsible for the murder of thousands of innocent men, women, and children. It was nearly 10 years ago that a bright September day was darkened by the worst attack on the American people in our history. The images of 9/11 are seared into our national memory.
Okay, so let me be clear. Class warfare goes on in the United States right now. The rich are getting much richer, the poor are getting poorer, and the middle class is disappearing. In the last 30 years, we have seen a shift, a redistribution of wealth to the tune of trillions of dollars that have gone out of the hands of the middle class and working families to the top 1/10 of 1%.
Those protests against Wall Street continue to grow across the country today. Here in New York, thousands of demonstrators descended on the financial district as big labor unions joined in. And
Michael Moore, how significant do you think these protests are?
I think they're quite significant. I think that this is something that certainly is spreading all over the United States. There are new Occupy movements beginning in towns and cities every day. And now it's spread across the world.
When was the last time anyone ever asked you for $700 billion?
On the second try, the House passes a sprawling $700 billion government rescue of the financial industry.
The billionaire says, while most Americans struggle to make ends meet, we mega-rich continue to get our extraordinary tax breaks. My friends and I have been coddled long enough.
I pay a lower tax rate on much of my income than my cleaning lady does.
This is the shocking moment. Cops at the University of California in Davis clamped down on around a dozen youngsters protesting against tuition fees and police brutality as part of the Occupy movement.
that when Bush left office, after all of the trickle-down economics, after all of the deregulation, the American and world's financial system was on the verge of collapse.
Yeah, Suzanne, I can't tell you how quickly this happened because we were just telling you that this was fairly peaceful. But what happened was protesters started going into that park, throwing over the barricades, and now there are arrests being made. Police are streaming in.
Stop spraying us!
That when I got down to Washington, I mean, I was really shocked to see how much the interests of Wall Street, how much power a handful of Wall Street banks have over our government, and how much control they had over their bailout.
How much power do they have? Spell it out. How much they have?
They dictated the terms of their own bailout.
And just having an operation performed in a room like this costs about $3,000 an hour. That's for starters. Come on in. Give you a couple of quick examples. If you look at a hospital bill, you might see an IV bag charge. It's an IV like this, about $280 just for the IV bag. That might strike people as very high. A stapler. This is a stapler that's often used in surgery. Something like this costs about $1,200. This is a chest tube. If someone has compression of one of their lungs, they might need a chest tube like this. That costs about $1,100. And you'll find examples like that really all over a room like this. Suture, something that's used in just about every operating room in the world. This type of suture over here costs about $200. And if you look at even devices like this is a needle that's used for biopsy. So if there's a concern that someone has a tumor, they would use a needle like this, and this is going to cost about $800. Now, it's important to keep in mind, if you ask the manufacturers of a device like this, why so much money? They'll say, well, it took years to develop something like this. The research and development costs are significant. Also, they're guaranteeing a certain level of effectiveness of this needle. That costs money as well. But something maybe you didn't know, when you look at a hospital bill, it's not just the cost of the supplies. There's also administrative costs that are built in. There's the cost of covering people who simply don't have insurance or can't pay. That's built into these costs as well. And finally, keep in mind that what is charged and what is ultimately paid are two very different numbers.
Well, the question for Congress is whether we're going to solve a problem, which means providing a means for 12 million people who are uninsured to get insurance, or whether we're going to create a problem by making it impossible for people like your family members to keep the health coverage they have right now.
I think we needed to have a program to help all Americans get access to health care.
We were the only industrialized nation without
it. But if you look at the dilemma you face as a physician, and I still practice medicine at the hospital, you had heart surgery, you were kind to mention it. One of the biggest dilemmas I face is when I know what to do for somebody, but I can't afford to do it for them.
I was alive when Teddy Roosevelt said, we need health care for every American. Barack Obama, the man from Illinois, said we need health care for every American.
Today, after almost a century of trying, today, after over a year of debate, today, after all the votes have been tallied, health insurance reform becomes law in the United States of America. When it comes to telephone calls, nobody is listening to your telephone calls.
Top stories on this Monday, June 24th. Former NSA analyst Edward Snowden, charged by the U.S. with espionage, is on the move this morning. Snowden slipped out of Hong Kong yesterday with laptops full of American secrets. He spent the night at a Moscow airport. He's booked on a flight to Cuba, and he's bound eventually for Ecuador. Snowden has formally applied for asylum there. Ecuador's foreign minister said the government is considering it, but the U.S. is warning the countries that Snowden may travel to send him back home.
Talk a little bit about how the American surveillance state actually functions. Does it target the actions of Americans?
NSA and the intelligence community in general is focused on getting intelligence wherever it can by any means possible that it believes on the grounds of sort of a self-certification that they serve the national interest. Originally, we saw that focus very narrowly tailored as foreign intelligence gathered overseas. Now, increasingly, we see that it's happening domestically. And to do that, the NSA specifically targets the communications of everyone. It ingests them by default. It collects them in its system, and it filters them, and it analyzes them, and it measures them, and it stores them for periods of time, simply because that's the easiest, most efficient, and most valuable way to achieve these ends. So while they may be intending to target someone associated with a foreign government or someone that they suspect of terrorism, they're collecting your communications to do so. Any analyst at any time can target anyone, any selector anywhere. Where those communications will be picked up depends on the range of the sensor networks and the authorities that that analyst is empowered with. Not all analysts have the ability to target everything, but I, sitting at my desk, certainly had the authorities to wiretap anyone, from you or your accountant to a federal judge to even the president if I had a personal email.
Before any strike is taken, there must be near certainty that no civilians will be killed or injured, the highest standard we can set.
We begin today with the news that another innocent civilian has become the victim of a U.S. drone strike in Yemen. This attack comes just a month after a massive drone strike killed at least 15 people traveling in a wedding convoy. Human rights organizations argue that there were no Islamic militants in that convoy and that only innocent civilians were targeted.
Brandon Bryan served for 5 years as a drone operator in the U.S. Air Force. With his joystick, he engaged in 1,626 killings. In the end, Bryan almost perished himself.
I felt like it destroyed my soul for the longest time. If I say that I have a mental issue, if I have a mental problem with killing people, it's looked down upon. Like, if you can't do violence while you're in the military, you're a weakling.
I spoke with one of the tribal leaders present in 2009 at the place where the U.S. cruise missiles targeted the village of Al-Ma'jala in Lawdar, Abyan. More than 40 civilians were killed, including 4 pregnant women. The tribal leader and others tried to rescue the victims, but the bodies were so decimated that it was impossible to differentiate between those of children, women, and their animals.
Against the United States drone attacks in Pakistan.
People from all over the country, irrespective of their ages and backgrounds, came together to the rally.
The Bureau for Investigative Journalism estimates that since 2004, the CIA drone war in Pakistan has killed somewhere between 2,500 and 3,600 people.
We're going to learn 2 terms, the Overton window and the manufacturing of consent. We're going to use the popularity of drones to explain it. The Overton window is basically the frame of what Americans think is acceptable behavior. If the wealthy, government, or policymakers want to make you and me accept a behavior Americans don't think is right, what they do is present an extreme version of what they want, so everything up until that point doesn't sound as crazy. The moving of that frame is called the manufacturing of consent. This is after 9/11 we began doing the first drone strikes, killing people in the Middle East. But Americans didn't feel comfortable with killing people with flying murder robots. So they needed to change the idea of what a drone was to the American people. They began the manufacturing of consent with introducing toy RC helicopters, available to the mass market in the early parts of the millennium. After everyone became accustomed to remote control flying toys, they moved on to camera drones that anyone could operate with their cell phone in 2007. This then moved on to semi-professional camera drones, and finally drone racing began, making it a sport. The final product of this process is when you hear the word drone, you don't think of death from the sky, but something a filmmaker, pro vlogger, or an alternative athlete uses.